The Russo-Turkish War of 1828–1829 was sparked by the Greek War of Independence. The war broke out after the Sultan closed the Dardanelles to Russian ships and revoked the Akkerman Convention in retaliation for Russian participation in the Battle of Navarino. Opening hostilities. At the start of hostilities, the Russian army of 100,000 men was commanded by Emperor Nicholas I, while the Ottoman forces were commanded by Hussein Pasha. In April and May 1828, the Russian commander-in-chief, Prince Peter Wittgenstein, moved into Romanian Principates Wallachia and Moldavia. In June 1828, the main Russian forces under the emperor crossed the Danube and advanced into Dobrudja. The Russians then laid prolonged sieges to three key Ottoman citadels in modern Bulgaria: Shumla, Varna and Siedlce. With the support of the Black Sea Fleet under Alexei Grieg, Varna was captured on the 29th of September. The siege of Shumla proved much more problematic, as the 40,000-strong Ottoman garrison outnumbered the Russian forces. As the latter were harassed by Turkish troops and ill-equipped, many of its soldiers died of disease or exhaustion. The campaign turned to be an embarrassing one for Russia, considered a great military power, as its troops had to withdraw to Moldavia with heavy losses without having captured Shumla and Siedlce. Changing fortunes. As winter approached, the Russian army was forced to leave Shumla and retreat back to Bessarabia. In February 1829, the cautious Wittgenstein was replaced by the more energetic Hans Karl von Diebitsch, and the Tsar left the army for St. Petersburg. On the 7th of May, 60,000 soldiers led by Field Marshal Diebitsch crossed the Danube and resumed the siege of Siedlce. The Sultan sent a 40,000-strong contingent to the relief of Varna, which was defeated at the Battle of Kulevica on the 30th of May. 3 weeks later, on the 19th of June, Siedlce fell to the Russians. Meanwhile, Ivan Paskevich advanced on the Caucasian front, defeated the Turks at the Battle of Akik and captured Kars on the 23rd of June and Erzurum, in northeastern Anatolia on the 27th of June, the 120th anniversary of the Poltava. On the 2nd of July, Diebitsch launched the Transbalkan Offensive, the first in Russian history since the 10th century campaigns of Sviatoslav I. The contingent of 35,000 Russians moved across the mountains, circumventing the besieged Shumla on the way to Constantinople. The Russians captured Burgas 10 days later, and the Turkish reinforcement was routed near Sliven on the 31st of July. By the 22nd of August, the Russians had taken Adrianople, reportedly causing the Muslim population in the city to leave. The Ottoman palace in Adrianople, was heavily damaged by Russian troops. The Treaty of Adrianople. Faced with these several defeats, the Sultan decided to sue for peace. The Treaty of Adrianople on the 14th of September 1829 gave Russia most of the eastern shore of the Black Sea and the mouth of the Danube. Turkey recognized Russian sovereignty over parts of northwest present-day Armenia. Serbia achieved autonomy, and Russia was allowed to occupy Moldavia and Wallachia until Turkey had paid a large indemnity. Moldavia and Wallachia remained Russian protectorates until the Crimean War. Archaic slavery was abolished during this period. The Straits question was settled 4 years later, when both powers signed the Treaty of Untitled. Caucasus Front. Although the main fighting was in the west, there was significant action on the Caucasus Front. Paskevich's main aims were to tie down as many Turkish troops as possible. to capture the Turkish forts on the Black Sea coast that supported the Circassians and might be used to land troops, and to push the border west to some desirable point. Most of the Turkish side was held by the semi-independent Pasha of Akkaltsikha and Muslim Georgian Beys who ruled the hills. Cars on an upland plain blocked the road from Akkaltsikha to Erzurum, the main city in eastern Turkey. The Russo-Persian War had just ended, which removed a major danger, since two-thirds of his troops were tied down holding the Caucasus and watching the Persians. He had only 15,000 men to fight the Turks. The Turks delayed attacking so he had time to move troops and supplies west, concentrating at Gyumri on the border. 1828 June. Kars. On the 14th of June he set out for Kars 40 miles southwest, which was held by 11,000 men and 151 guns. The capture of Kars was almost an accident. During a skirmish in the suburbs, a company of riflemen under Lieutenant Labinzev made an unauthorized advance. Seeing the danger, other companies rushed to the rescue. The danger drew in more soldiers until most of the Russian force was massed at one point. The wall was breached and soon the Turks held only the citadel. At 10 a.m. the 23rd of June the citadel surrendered. The Turks lost 2,000 killed and wounded, 1,350 prisoners and 151 guns, but much of the garrison managed to escape. The Russians lost 400 killed and wounded. Kayos Pasha of Erzurum was within an hour's march of Kars, but when he heard the news he withdrew to Ardahan. 1828 July. Akkaltsikha Paskevich fainted toward Erzurum and then marched north to Akkaltsikha. Under bombardment, the 1,000-man garrison became demoralized and half of them tried to escape by letting themselves down the walls on ropes, but most were killed. The Russians used the same ropes to scale the walls and the remaining 300 men surrendered. 1828 August. Akkaltsikha. 40 miles west was Akkaltsikha with 10,000 men under its semi-independent Pasha. It guarded the Bojmie Gorge which led northeast to Georgia. Instead of taking the main road which went southwest to Ardahan and then north, Paskevich and 8,000 men marched 3 days through roadless country and reached Akkaltsikha on the 3rd of August. The next day Kayos Pasha and 30,000 men encamped 4 miles from the fort. Paskevich, outnumbered by an enemy on two sides, turned on Kayos. After a day-long battle, Kayos, wounded, and 5,000 infantry fled to the fort and the remaining Turks scattered south to Ardahan. The Russians took enormous booty and lost 531 men, including a general. The siege now began. Akkaltsikha had 3 lines of defense: the fortress, the citadel within and the town without. The town, with its crooked streets, ravines and bastions, was almost a fortress itself. The attack began at 4 p.m. The citizens defended themselves as best they could and by nightfall the town was on fire. In one mosque 400 people burned to death. By dawn of the 16th the ruined town was in Russian hands. They moved artillery up to bear on the fortress walls. On the 17th of August Kayos Pasha surrendered on the condition that he and 4,000 men be allowed to withdraw with their arms and property. The Russians lost about 600 men and the Turks 6,000. The next day they took the Ataskha castle which controlled the Bojmie Gorge leading from Akkaltsikha northeast to Georgia. On the 22nd of August they occupied Ardahan, the road junction connecting Akkaltsikha to the Kars-Erzurum road. Seeing no further opportunities, the Russians retired to winter quarters. On the Black Sea coast Anapa was captured on the 12th of June and Potter on the 15th of June. By September Chavchadvadze had occupied the Pashalik of Bayazid with little opposition, and the banners of Your Majesty float over the headwaters of the Euphrates. On the last day of September the Russians occupied Guria. 1829, Kayos Pasha was replaced by Saleh Pasha with Hagki Pasha as his deputy. In winter Paskevich went to St. Petersburg with a plan for a massive invasion of Anatolia, but this was rejected. 20,000 raw recruits would be sent to the Caucasus, but they would not be ready until late summer. On the 30th of January the Russian ambassadors to Tehran, including Alexander Griboyedov, were killed by Imok. Both sides were too wise to start another war, but the possibility tied up part of the Russian army. On the 21st of February Akhmet Begafulo and 15,000 Lazars and Ajars occupied the town of Akhaltsikha, slaughtered the Armenian part of the population, and besieged the fortress. 12 days later Burtsev forced the Bohemia Gorge and the Ajars fled with the loot. General Hess drove back a Turkish advance from Bateman, captured the Turkish camp of Limani south of Pota. Far to the southeast Bayazid was besieged by the Pasha of Van. The main Turkish advance began in mid-May. Kiagi Bek approached Ardahan, but was driven north to Egeria where he threatened Akhaltsikha. He was defeated at Digur south of Akhaltsikha and the Russians went south to join Paskevich at Kars. 1829, June, Saganlug and Erzurum. On the 13th of June Paskevich left Kars for Erzurum. The Turks had 50,000 men including 30,000 Azams. They stood between Hasankala and Zivin on the Erzurum-Kars road. Further east on the road an advanced force held the Miladius Pass over the Saganlug mountain. Paskevich chose to take the inferior road to the north, place himself near Zevan between the two armies and attack Hagki Pasha from the rear. There were complex maneuvers and small actions. At 7 p.m. on the 19th Paskevich attacked and completely defeated the Western Army. Next day he turned east and captured Hagki Pasha and 19 guns, but most of his men managed to scatter. With the armies out of the way he set out for Erzurum. On the 27th of June the great city, which had not seen Christian soldiers within its walls for 5 centuries, surrendered, due, it is said, to the cowardice of its citizens. 1829, after Erzurum. From Erzurum the main road led northwest through Bayburt and Hart to Trebizond on the coast, a very formidable place that could only be taken with the fleet which was now busy on the Bulgarian coast. In July Burtsev went up this road and was killed at Hart. To retrieve Russia's reputation Paskevich destroyed Hart. He sent an army somewhere west and brought it back, went up the Trebizond road, saw that nothing could be accomplished in that direction, and returned to Erzurum. Hessenust and Sakan pushed north toward Batum and returned. The Pasha of Trebizond moved against Bayburt and was defeated on the 28th of September, the last action of the war. The Treaty of Adrianople was signed on the 2nd of September 1829, but it took a month for the news to reach Paskevich. In October his army began marching home. Russia kept the ports of Anapa and Pota, the border forts of Ataskar, Akarkalaki and Akhaltsikha fort, but returned Dardahan and the Pashaliks of Kars, Bayazid and most of Akhaltsikha Pashalik. In 1855 and 1877 Paskevich's work had to be done all over again. One consequence of the war, the migration of 90,000 Armenians from Turkish to Russian territory.